Hi everyone, welcome back to story time. This week I'm reading the last story in Monster Stew by Mitra Modarressi, and it is called Monster Stew. Once upon a time, there were two small monsters, Hansel and his sister, Gretel. Look at the gingerbread house. One day, they set out for a stroll in a nearby forest. Deeper and deeper into the woods they went, munching on fruits and berries and an occasional tree as they walked, until they came across a beautiful gingerbread house. "Oh, what luck!" said Gretel, and they dug right in, for monsters have quite an appetite. So good. Yeah. The house belonged to a wicked witch, and she was watching them from behind a tree. "I was hoping to catch some plump little children," she thought to herself, "but these monsters will do nicely. I'll fatten them up and eat them for Sunday supper." Oh, the wicked witch. The witch stepped out from her hiding place. "Welcome, dearies," she said in her friendliest voice. "You seem so hungry. Won't you stay for lunch?" "Oh, thank you," said Gretel between chomps. "We're famished," said Hansel. The witch cooked them a feast. "I hope you like it," she said, and indeed they did, for they ate every last bite, including the plates and the silverware and the flowers on the table. The witch thought they were a bit piggish, but she was sure that they would taste delicious. "Wouldn't you like to rest for a while?" she offered. Hansel and Gretel accepted. She showed them to the cellar and locked the door behind them. "What a lovely hostess," said Gretel. "Yes," agreed Hansel, "and such a nice home." As the monsters napped, the witch looked through her cookbooks. "I must find a good monster stew recipe," she cackled. But Hansel and Gretel didn't sleep for long. "I'm starving," said Gretel. "Me too," said Hansel. "Let's eat." And they began to gnaw their way through the cellar. They ate 3 bags of apples, 2 bags of flour, a ball of string, a pile of firewood, 7 pairs of old shoes, and a bicycle. "What's all that racket?" the witch yelled down to the cellar. "We're hungry," cried Hansel and Gretel. "All right," the witch answered, "I'll get you a snack." Instead, she went out to her garden to gather ingredients for the monster stew. By now, Hansel and Gretel had eaten the entire basement, but they were still hungry, so they ate straight through the cellar door and started chewing on the kitchen. "You beasts!" the witch cried when she came in. "You're eating me out of house and home." "But we're starving," Hansel said. "Did you get more treats?" asked Gretel. Maybe it's not a good idea to invite monsters into your home. "All in good time," the witch said, and she shooed them out of the kitchen. She realized that she had better make her monster stew quickly while she still had a kitchen left. She put her biggest kettle on the stove and started chopping vegetables. Hansel and Gretel tried to behave, but they were just too hungry. By the time the witch came to get them, Gretel had swallowed 4 jars of potion and 3 flying broomsticks, and Hansel had finished off the witch's library of spell books and her magic wand. "Fiends!" the witch screeched. They tried to apologize, but eating all that magic made Hansel hiccup fireflies, and Gretel kept floating off the ground. "You two are impossible," the witch said. "Kabloo, kablan, be gone!" And she waved her arms, but nothing happened. "Oh no," she cried. "Where's my wand? I'm ruined!" And she hopped on her only remaining broomstick and fled. Look, there's a little monster bite out of it. Hansel and Gretel waved goodbye, and after polishing off the rest of the house, they decided to head for home. The end. All right, and last but not least, we have one more story, The Elves and the Shoemaker by Paul Galdone. There once was a shoemaker who, through no fault of his own, became so poor that at last he had nothing left but just enough leather to make one pair of shoes. He cut out the shoes at night so he could set to work on them the next morning. Because he had a good conscience, the shoemaker laid himself down in his bed and fell asleep at once. In the morning, after he had said his prayers, the shoemaker went to his workshop. There he found the pair of shoes made and finished and standing on his table. He was very much astonished and could not tell what to think. He took the shoes in his hand to examine them more carefully. They were so well made that every stitch was in the right place, just as if they had come from the hand of a master workman. Soon a customer entered, and as the shoes fitted him very well, he paid more than the usual price for them. Now the shoemaker had enough money to buy leather for 2 more pairs of shoes. He cut them out at night and intended to set to work the next morning with fresh spirit. But that was not to be, for when he got up, they were already finished. A customer soon bought them and gave the shoemaker so much money that he was able to buy enough leather for 4 more pairs. Early the next morning, he found the 4 pairs finished also, and so it always happened. Whatever the shoemaker cut out in the evening was finished by the morning, and soon he was making a very good living. One night, not long before Christmas, when the shoemaker had finished cutting out the shoes from the leather, he turned to his wife before he went to bed and said, "How would it be if we were to stay up tonight and see who it is that does us this service?" Who it's going to be? What's he going to find? His wife agreed and set a candle to burn. Then they both hid in a corner of the room behind some coats that were hanging up. They peeked out between the coats and began to watch. What do we think? Who do we think is going to be making the shoes? Let's find out. As soon as it was midnight, in came 2 neatly formed, naked little elves. They seated themselves on the shoemaker's table, took up the work that was already prepared, and began to stitch, pierce, and hammer the leather. The elves worked so cleverly and quickly with their little fingers that the shoemaker's eyes could scarcely follow them, so full of wonder was he. The elves never stopped until all the shoes were finished and were standing ready on the table. Then they jumped up and ran off. The next morning, the shoemaker's wife said to her husband, "Those elves have made us rich, and we ought to show them how grateful we are. With all their running about and nothing to cover them, they must be very cold." She smiled. "I tell you what, I will make them little shirts, coats, waistcoats, and breeches for them, and knit each of them a pair of stockings, and you shall make each of them a pair of shoes." The husband consented willingly, and that night, when everything was finished, they laid the gifts on the table instead of the cut-out leather. Then they hid themselves so that they could observe how the elves behaved when they saw their presents. At the stroke of midnight, the elves rushed in, ready to set to work. But when they found the neat little clothes made just for them, they stood a moment in surprise, and then they showed the greatest delight. Quickly, they took up the pretty garments and slipped them on, singing, "What spruce and dandy boys are we? No longer cobblers will we be." They hopped and danced about, jumping over the chairs and tables, and at last they danced out the door. From that time on, the elves were never seen again, but the shoemaker and his wife prospered as long as they lived. The end. I'll see you next week for story time.